Good morning. Get the bone density of a 20-year-old. That's what we're talking about today. I was sent an article last week. Last week, was it? Yeah, from one of the ladies on our program who sent me something from a research fellow at Oxford, Dr. Catherine Walter, who won a powerlifting competition in her 70s. Now, she has the bone density of a 20-year-old, and she was obviously a big advocate for resistance exercise as we age, saying it's kind of the only way to keep our strength, our muscle, and it was quite nice to hear an approach like that in mainstream, and it is becoming more mainstream now. People are hearing about it more, despite being a government recommendation to do muscle strengthening exercise at least twice a week. But it's not really talked about, is it? Like, let me know if you've ever gone to someone, or not complaining about how it's communicated necessarily, but you kind of don't go into a GP and they never really ask, have you tried resistance exercise or anything? And because there's a lot of reasons why they don't do that, because there's a way to do it, right? There's lifting weights and there's lifting weights. There's doing a squat and then there's doing a squat. And what I mean by that is the technique side of things. Are you using the right muscles? Are you impacting your joints when you do it? Are you confident doing it? And that takes a lot of time to perfect. That takes a lot of repetitions, a lot of showing up to do. And we don't really have the time to do that in a 5-minute appointment. And when you look at the health effects of this, like bone density, how important that is as we age in terms of risk of fall and breaking a bone. We know that if someone fractures their hip from a fall, it's quite worrying to say, but the risk of death is very high after that due to the recovery, due to the muscle loss with age. Then it's a vicious cycle in terms of bed rest, lack of muscle, lack of independence. And whenever you embark on a health and fitness journey, I just want you to remember this, because we're often so fixated on the scales, which albeit are another marker of health, but no one ever says, hi Matt, how's your bone density going? And these are really important markers that, despite what the scales say sometimes, if you've hit some exercise sessions that week, you've got to give yourself credit. If you've got a little bit stronger, we do a benchmark session at the start of each month. And yesterday morning, I did a technique session at 8 a.m. And we just went over some technique, and some of the ladies were saying, wow, yeah, I've needed that to do a push-up. Now my shoulder doesn't hurt when I do it. Now I can start to target the back of my arms a bit more. Oh, I'm feeling that in the muscle now. Now my chest is over the hands. I might maybe share a little video on that. So these things are really important. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh yeah, it's not really working, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, it's not really working, then I hope this just reminds you to take credit from the habits that you have installed already, because they're going to take you quite far. You've just got to look for the positives in there. You've got to look for it. Otherwise, you'll just see no change. But what happens if you didn't do that? What happens if you didn't do that? So it would be weird if I talked about the aging well stuff, muscle, without talking about nutrition at all. Now, that's often a question that leads onto it. If you think about the difference between, say, a 20-year-old and a 70-year-old, well, from the age of about 40, our ability to synthesize protein reduces. And this means how we essentially utilize it for recovery or whatever process. So take muscle protein synthesis, which is essentially the recovery, everything that how your body uses protein post whatever, or just in life, just at a meal. And when you eat it, say a 20-year-old eats 20 odd grams of protein, they'll get a maximal effect of this. That's all they need. It's fine. When you get to about 40, your ability to do this declines, which means you either need to eat more protein or better quality protein. And better quality protein means ones that have a full amino acid profile. If I'm boring you with this, here's what I mean by this. A complete protein, it's a bit like, let's say you're trying to build a house and you've got some key pillars in there. The key pillars you definitely need, but you still need the bricks around them as well. But it's a bit like eating an incomplete protein whether that's like beans, legumes, stuff like that, which is fine. You can mix them and get a bit a better profile. It's a bit like you're missing a few pillars, you're missing a few bricks. Compare that to meat, eggs, dairy, meat alternatives generally, most of them, soy. That will be more of a complete protein. So they've got the pillars, they've got the bricks. I'm not a builder, so if that's a horrendous analogy, do let me know. I'll bring the high vis. Um, Hopefully you get my point in this. So the quality of the protein needs to go up as well. There's a few things you can do as well. There's some research on omega-3 fish oil helping this process. But my point in this is we need to be wary of our protein intake as well. You know, you hear things like too much protein impacts calcium and bone. Actually, the opposite is true, especially as we age. It's probably worth a video in itself, probably a training in itself. Yeah, maybe I'll do one. Comment below on aging if you want me to do a training on this. Protein, muscle, best exercise to do, technique. That'd be a good one, actually, wouldn't it? What do you think, Dora? You're aging. Wow. Got a little grey beard. Dora, look at that grey beard. Seems like she was only 8 years ago. 8 years. 8! Anyway, still as hungry as ever. And still as crazy as ever. She's seen a rabbit. Rabbit. A rabbit. Anyway, I will leave you with that. And I hope that helps you put your attention on some things that you can do today, regardless of weight scales, regardless of the magazines say, just eat nothing and don't eat too much protein and just lose weight on an extreme, rather than actually focus on what your body can do. Because it's quite exciting when you do that. And all these other measures that come out, not that the scales are pointless, etc. Of course, they're not pointless. But sometimes if you need to take a break from them and just focus on what you are doing and the benefits of what you are doing, that can be a good place to start to build that confidence so that you stick to something for as long as possible to get the results that you actually need. Anyway, I'll leave you with that. Have an awesome day. Probably going to get soaked on the way home. It's just started raining. So I'll see you later. Take care.